Hugh Hefner's name is practically synonymous with the Playboy lifestyle, complete with lavish parties, celebrity guests, and not one, but two legendary mansions. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're taking a family-friendly look into the history of the Playboy Mansions. Hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into a special episode of This House. Hugh Hefner was born in Chicago in 1926, and by the early 1950s, he was a young man with big dreams. In 1953, with just a small bankroll of borrowed funds, Hefner launched Playboy magazine out of his own apartment. The very first issue, famously featuring a Marilyn Monroe centerfold, was published in December 1953 and sold more than 50,000 copies, an instant sensation that set the stage for a new kind of magazine. As the 1950s and 60s progressed, Playboy grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, blending provocative images with high-profile interviews and articles. Hefner positioned himself as the embodiment of the magazine's cosmopolitan, free-spirited ethos, the suave figure in a silk smoking jacket with a pipe in hand, surrounded by glamour and lavish living. By the 1960s, he was not just a publisher, but a public personality, often seen socializing with celebrities and promoting what he called the Playboy philosophy, which dovetailed with the era's loosening social norms. Hefner even expanded the Playboy brand into upscale Playboy clubs, staffed by the iconic costume bunnies, further multiplying his wealth and fame. With success came a personal fortune that allowed Hefner to live out his own bon vivant fantasies. He became known for residing in opulent, party-filled homes, which drew intense media fascination. His lifestyle was not just for show, it was very real and very grand. As his empire boomed, he set his sights on acquiring a mansion that would both reflect and facilitate his new status. The stage was set for the first of the Playboy Mansions. Hugh Hefner's first mansion was located in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. This classical French brick and limestone residence had been built around the turn of the century for a prominent surgeon, Dr. George Swift Isham, and was designed by architect James Gamble Rogers, who was renowned for his designs at Yale and Columbia universities. In December 1959, with Playboy magazine success blossoming, Hefner acquired the stately home for about $370,000, or around $4 million in today's money. At only 6 years after the magazine's launch, Hugh Hefner had enough clout and capital to establish what would become known as the original Playboy Mansion. Once Hefner moved in, the Chicago mansion quickly became a hub of 24/7 extravagance and creative flair. Hefner didn't just live in the house, he transformed it. The mansion's basement, for example, was converted into an exotic retreat featuring a swimming pool with an underwater viewing window and a tropical-themed lounge. Hefner even installed a faux grotto adjacent to the pool that you could only enter by swimming through a waterfall, a playful preview of the famous grotto he'd later built in California. The entire house was outfitted for entertaining and luxury. A grand two-story ballroom dominated the first floor, hosting Hefner's weekly parties and film screenings, and the top floor was turned into a dormitory-style residence for Playboy bunnies and magazine staff. In fact, up to 6 apartments and several guest rooms were carved out of the mansion, and Hefner's friends and associates, from authors to artists, were often in residence. Through the 1960s, the Chicago Playboy Mansion was the place to be. Hefner's Friday night soirees there were legendary, drawing not only Playboy models and employees, but also Chicago high society and visiting celebrities. Yet as much as the mansion was a private home, it also doubled as part of Playboy's corporate world. Hefner often treated the ballroom as a media room and press conference area, and the mansion even contained a full commercial kitchen to serve guests at all hours. By the early 1970s, however, Hefner's center of gravity began to shift. The allure of sunny California, along with its burgeoning entertainment industry, beckoned him. Starting in 1971, Hefner began dividing his time between Chicago and a new Playboy Mansion West in Los Angeles. By 1975, Hefner had finally made Los Angeles his permanent home base, effectively mothballing the Chicago mansion. This mansion, often dubbed Playboy Mansion West, was an architectural gem with an interesting pedigree. It was designed in 1927 by architect Arthur Kelly in a Gothic Tudor Revival style and originally known as Holmby House. The first owner was Arthur Letts Jr., heir to a department store fortune. Letts had spared no expense in building this palatial residence. We'll take a trip back in time to when the house was first built so that we can compare it to how it appeared when Hefner took over. And of course, there's no better place to start than with a quick view of the floor plan, noting that the entire main floor is anchored around the Great Hall. Upstairs, Letts had a service wing that could accommodate a dozen live-in staff, something which Hefner certainly saw as having great potential for his bunnies. Let's stay in the roaring 20s for a few more moments while we head through the house, viewing it as it originally appeared, starting with the Great Hall. Clad in rich wood paneling and inset with limestone door surrounds and accompanied by a grand staircase, the house was designed with huge parties in mind. Making our way under the grand staircase, we find the living room, the largest room in the house, once again clad in oak paneling and resting below a Jacobean plaster ceiling. It was adorned with centuries-old tapestries and provocative bisque, among other feminine touches. To the far end of the living room, we walk down a hallway to discover the library carrying on the same finishes we have seen throughout, but now incorporating extensive relief work along the fireplace around. Let's make our way back over to the Great Hall and dive through the pointed Gothic arch straight ahead. Here we find the dining room, boasting the most extensive carvings in the house. Carvings that took a team of artists over a year to complete, using mostly handheld tools with minor assistance from rudimentary power tools. Heading upstairs, we find the owner's suite, taking up the same amount of floor space as both the living room and the library combined. When Hefner visited the house, this must have been the space that sealed the deal for him, with gilded wall panels and crushed velvet carpet in the bedroom, and polished marble skirting the ensuite with a tub and shower big enough to throw a party in. Playboy Enterprises bought the mansion in 1971 for about $1.1 million, around $8.7 million today, still a steal by modern standards. The estate spanned 5.3 acres of prime Los Angeles real estate with rolling lawns and a grand 21,000 square foot manor house. This was to be the new epicenter of Playboy's glamour. Once Hefner moved into the Holmby Hills mansion, it didn't take long for the parties and publicity to elevate it to mythic status. Throughout the 1970s and beyond, the Los Angeles Playboy Mansion became famous for its lavish, star-studded gatherings, often making headlines. Celebrities from all walks, film stars, rock musicians, sports heroes, all attended Hefner's extravagant events there. The mansion's grounds and amenities were an adult playground unlike any other. A now infamous feature was the backyard swimming pool complex, complete with a cavernous artificial grotto where guests could soak in hot tubs in a cave-like setting. In fact, the entire property was so elaborate that it held one of the few private zoo licenses in the country, meaning Hefner legally kept a mini menagerie on site. It was not unusual to see peacocks strutting on the lawn or monkeys swinging in an outdoor enclosure. Hefner delighted in his exotic pets and even maintained an aviary with tropical birds on the grounds. For a time, the Playboy Mansion was arguably as famous as any Hollywood movie studio lot and often just as lively. Over the years, the mansion and its wild parties occasionally courted controversy and scandal, but Hefner also mellowed with age while living there. In the 1980s, he suffered a minor stroke and subsequently dialed back some of the decadence, even marrying playmate Kimberly Conrad in 1989, and attempting a more traditional family life for a while. But all stories must eventually come to an end, and for Hugh Hefner, that chapter closed in 2017. He continued to helm Playboy magazine well into his later years, and he maintained his image as the ultimate host and playboy even as he aged into his 80s. In his final years, Hefner saw Playboy face a changing media landscape, and the magazine underwent transformations, but Hefner remained a figurehead and mentor at the company. On a personal level, he married a third time to Crystal Harris in 2012, settling into a quieter domestic life in his 80s, albeit still within the walls of his beloved mansion. On September 27, 2017, Hugh Hefner passed away peacefully at the Playboy Mansion at 91 years old. His two famous mansions have had very different destinies since their Playboy glory days, but each continues to intrigue to this day. In Chicago, Playboy Enterprises leased the old mansion to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for a nominal rent, allowing art students to literally live and work in the former Party Palace. A few years later, Hefner's company donated the Chicago mansion outright to the art school, a gesture that turned a symbol of leisure into a place of learning. Eventually, the Art Institute decided to cash in on the valuable property, and the mansion was sold in 1989 to developers, and by the early 1990s, it was converted into upscale luxury condominiums. Out in Los Angeles, however, the Playboy Mansion's fate took a dramatic turn even before Hefner passed away. In 2016, facing the realities of age and changing business needs, he agreed to sell the Playboy Mansion for a whopping $100 million. The sale came with a very unique condition: Hefner would be allowed to continue living in the mansion for the rest of his life. Since his passing, the home has undergone extensive restoration work, preserving its historical significance and architectural character into the next generation. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Which mansion was your favorite, or maybe something else stuck out to you? Either way, let me know down below in the comments section. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.